Hey guys, in this training, I'm going to walk you through a high-level overview of the listing process. Now, don't worry, I'm going to also have, we'll also have a detailed training for each step in the process, but this is just to show you a high-level overview so you can kind of see from a bird's eye view how the listing process should look and where you're at in the current process, because as a new agent sometimes we say, well, what's next? What should I be working on next? This training is to help you understand the listing process and what's to come from step to step. So jumping right in, we're going to start this training from after you've met with a potential seller and that seller has decided to move forward. So step one is the listing signing meeting, as I call it. So a couple things here. This is where you and the seller meet, like I talked about before, after the seller has actually agreed to hire you. So you may have, this may be at the actual listing presentation where you and the seller decide to move forward right there on the spot, or you've already presented to the seller and a couple days after they've reached back out to you, or you, being the great agent that you are, have followed up and the listing or the seller has decided to schedule a separate meeting to come and sign all the listing paperwork. So a couple things to note here. Make sure that when you are signing all the required listing documentation that you actually install the lockbox at this meeting. You're going to need obviously that lockbox for when you go live on the market, but there may be times where you have to access the property, whether that be the photographer or somebody else needs to access the property, and you want to really protect your time. So make sure that you install the lockbox while you're at the actual house, so that you don't have to go back another time unnecessarily to put on just the lockbox. I've made that mistake time and time again, and there's nothing worse than taking 30-40 minutes out of your day just to go install a lockbox. So make sure you do that at this actual meeting. Now, here's the 8 documents that you're going to need to execute during this time. Now, again, don't worry, I walk you through in another training each specific document in another training, how to fill them out, what they are, a detailed explanation of where you need to sign, where the seller needs to sign, where you need to have initials, so on and so forth. But the 8 documents that you need to execute at the actual signing meeting is, number one, is the exclusive right to sell contract. This is the actual contract between you and the seller. Number 2 is the seller disclosure statement. It's a disclosure where the seller discloses anything, any and all facts about the home, whether something is wrong or not wrong. Number 3 is the lead-based paint disclosure. Number 4 is the bill of sale, where the homeowner will simply list out the items that will be included with the home sale and clearly list the items that are excluded from the sale of the home. Number 5 is the agency disclosure statement, stating your relationship with that actual seller. Number 6 and 7 is what I call the seller homework. Number 6 is the home upgrade, so it's a list of upgrades that the seller has done to the home, so that you as the agent know exactly, well, it gives you some more details on all of the home upgrades that have been done, and it gives you more facts about the property. Number 7 is what you love about your home form. This will just help you later when you're doing the marketing remarks in the MLS, and you can really understand from the seller's perspective what their favorite features are about the home that will help you articulate those to any potential buyers down the road. And then number 8 is the payoff authorization form. You're going to need to get this filled out so that the title company can order the payoff so that you can close on your transaction on time. All right, so that's step number 1. Step number 2 is preparing the home for sale. So a couple things here. Depending on if you are going to install the sign on your own, or you, like me, you actually hire that out and get a nice white post installed, and you have that sign company install your sign. So you want to, at this point in time, this is after you've got your listing documentation signed. You wouldn't want to order a sign before you've got your contract signed. But after you've got all those documents signed, move forward and get your sign installed as soon as possible. Number 2, this is where you're going to order photos from your photographer, or if you take your own photos, this will be the time that you want to actually take your own photos. Now, with photos, you want to ensure that you set really good expectations with the homeowner that that home is the cleanest that it has been in a long time. We call it being photo ready. So make sure the home is super clean so that when we take photos, the house looks amazing online. And with these two things, make sure that you set proper timing expectations with the seller. Believe it or not, I've actually been, a seller has actually fired me due to a sign being installed the day after I told him it was going to be installed. So I told him it was going to take 3 days. The sign company was busy. It took 4 days. And the seller thought that because of that, that I couldn't actually sell their home. So make sure that you set proper expectations with the seller, because expectations is everything when you're taking on a new client. Step number 3, the partial listing. So this is a big one. This is when you're actually inputting the listing information, photos, remarks into the MLS, but you're not going live with the listing just yet. You're just doing what's called a partial listing, and I'll show you on another detailed training how to do that. Number 2, you're going to configure showing time with the seller's showing instructions. So if the seller requires a 24-hour notice, or they have an alarm, or they have a dog, all the special instructions to show the home, you're going to configure all of those details in the showing time application in Realcom. Number 3, you'll then, once everything's ready to go and you have gone through the details of your listing, you're going to want to email your client the listing to review prior to going live on the market. So this will give you and your client to make any necessary changes before the home actually goes live on the market. There's nothing worse than going live on the market and you've got misspelled words in the marketing remarks. So this will give you and your client another chance just to make sure that all the details are covered, that you didn't miss anything, that your client likes the way that the listing is, so that when you do hit the market, you can start off on the right foot. Okay, step number 4, going live and handling showings. So once the seller approves the partial listing, you can then go ahead and make the listing live on the MLS. It's a super simple button. All you do is hit the right button and you go live on the market. So number 2, you're going to want to, after being live on the market, confirm that you set up showing time correctly in the MLS. So as a habit, what we always do is after we go live with the listing, we go back into that listing, ensure that the little showing time icon is in the listing, you click showing time and everything there is done correctly. And then lastly, you are going to want to confirm with your seller that they know actually how to confirm showings when you get your first showing request. So if they're going to do that through text message, make sure that when your seller gets the actual showing request, you give them a quick call and ensure they know how to do it. All right, step number 4, offer negotiation. So hopefully, shortly after you list your home, you get offers right away. And so number 1, the buyer's agent typically will email you the offer details, including the purchase agreement and all of the offer documentation. So as a best practice, number 2, you'll want to confirm with the agent that you have actually received their offer. It's a simple email response just to say, hey, I got your offer. I'll be presenting that shortly to my seller and I'll be back in touch. Number 3 is obviously presenting that offer to your client. Number 4, you'll either accept the offer or you will counter the offer. And then number 5, once the offer is agreed on, you'll ensure that you get what is called a bottom line purchase agreement along with all of the pending documentation. Again, don't worry, we will do another separate training walking you through those 2 processes. Okay, so this is supposed to be step number 6, but this is the actual pending process. So number 1, you want to, and this is huge, you want to make sure that you have all pending documentation before you move forward with the transaction. This is including the bottom line purchase agreement, copy of the earnest money deposit, all of your disclosures, and a copy of the pre-approval letter from the buyer's lender. Number 2, once you have verified you've gotten all that documentation, then and only then should you actually mark the property pending in the MLS. Number 3, You will then turn in those pending docs to our company operations director so that we can help house that information for you, make sure that you have all the proper documentation. Once that is completed, number 4, you can then move forward with the title company and order title. Number 5, you can confirm the buyer's inspection date or inspection information as long as it's applicable. Sometimes there are not inspections on an offer. So if there's an inspection, then you can go ahead and confirm that with the buyer's agent what day and time that that's actually going to be. Okay, moving forward, the buyer's inspection. So a couple things to note here. The buyer's inspection is actually paid for by the buyer, not the seller. The inspector works for the buyer, right? And so it's important that you let your client, the seller, know that. That's important. And really there are 3 things that can result from the buyer's inspection. Number 1, the inspection goes well and nothing has to happen and we move forward towards a closing. Number 2, there are things that come from that inspection, from that buyer's inspection, that the buyer wants to get addressed. So at that time, the buyer and seller can then renegotiate which items are to be repaired or replaced, or maybe the seller is going to give some type of credit to the buyer. Some type of renegotiation will happen. That's what can happen. That's the second thing that can happen. Number 3, if the inspection or if the buyer is asking for too many things that the seller address and the seller is not willing to do those things and the buyer and seller can't come to an agreement, we do what's called a mutual release. And all that means is that we shake hands, we go our separate ways, we put the house back on the market, and we're back to showing the property. Okay, step number 7, the lender's appraisal. Now, once you're through the buyer's inspection period, which is typically 7 to 10 days, and everything goes well and you're through renegotiations on the inspection, this actual inspection is paid for by the buyer as well. But the appraiser, unlike the inspection, the appraiser actually works for the lender, not the buyer. So it's a third-party, non-biased company that doesn't work for the buyer or the seller. Same things here as the inspection. 3 things could happen. If the home appraises for the actual purchase price, then there's nothing to worry about. You continue towards closing. Number 2, if the home does not appraise for the asking price, the buyer and the seller can renegotiate new terms to move forward towards closing. And then number 3, if just like the home buyer's inspection, if the buyer and seller cannot agree on new terms based on an appraisal, on a low appraisal, the buyer and the seller can agree to walk their separate ways, and the seller will then put the home back on the market. Now, step number 8, the best words in real estate, the clear to close. What this means is that the lender is 100% ready to close, and that there are no other things needed from the buyer in order for the lender to fund the loan. So once this has actually happened, you can then go ahead and move forward and schedule the buyer's final walkthrough and the actual closing date and time. Now, once that happens, you want to ensure that you obtain the closing statement from the title company to provide your client to review before closing. As a good agent, you want to ensure that your client has time to look at the closing numbers. You don't want them to see their closing numbers for the first time at closing. You don't want your client to have any surprises. You want to ensure they're having a good experience. Step number 9 is the actual closing. So a couple things here. Make sure that you actually show up early, right? There's nothing worse than you as the agent showing up late to the closing. So make sure that you show up early. Ensure that the closing statements match the actual numbers that the closer has. So once the title company gets there, ensure that the closing statement that you got from the title company a few days prior matches the numbers that you have with the closer that's sitting at the table. Next, make sure that you take notes on any follow-up details. A lot of the time there are things that come up or pop up during closing. You want to make sure you're right there taking notes. If you're going to get a closing gift, it's a great time to bring a closing gift to show your client appreciation, to show everybody at the closing table that you are a professional agent and that you're leading with gratitude. And then lastly, make sure that you turn in the actual closing docs and the commission check to the brokerage as soon as possible so that we can turn around and get you your commission check. And step number 10, final step number 10, the closing follow-up process. A lot of the time, this is where a lot of agents drop the ball because they get paid and then they forget about the details. So you want to ensure, was there any occupancy? Meaning, is the seller going to be living in the home after closing? Well, if so, make sure that you follow up on your occupancy. You, as the listing agent, are responsible for ordering the final water read. So after the seller moves out, you got to order that final water read. Make sure that you're coordinating, what does move-out day look like for your client, right? Make sure that it's not sloppy. And then the key exchange. So if there's any type of occupancy, make sure that that day of the key exchange is smooth and well planned out. So if you have questions, you can email one of us on the brokerage leadership team, but hopefully that gives you a high-level overview of the listing process. And next in the training process, you will start to get some more detailed trainings on each step of the process. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.